The conquered. 300 years had passed since humanity lost the war, and the galaxy had forgotten what humans were capable of. The hegemony ruled everything from the core worlds to the outer rim, and they had conquered Earth in less than 6 months when they first arrived. Their ships had darkened the skies of every major city, and their soldiers had walked through human armies like giants stepping on insects. The Treaty of Submission came after, a document that stripped humanity of everything. No more warships, no more weapons factories, no more military research of any kind. Orbital platforms circled Earth day and night, watching for any sign of resistance. And random inspections swept through human settlements to search for anything that could be turned into a weapon. Humans became workers, servants, and nothing more. They were scattered across the galaxy to mining colonies and space stations, used for their strong bodies and their strange ability to solve problems that other species could not. The hegemony found them useful, but never respected them. Ambassador Kethra of the Hegemony High Council spoke about humans often in his speeches, and he always said the same thing, that humans had spirit once, but now they had learned their place. The other species in the council chambers would laugh at his words, and no one ever disagreed on a mining colony called Forge 7, far from Earth and far from anywhere important. A young engineer named Sarah Vance worked in the deep tunnels where the air was thin and the heat was brutal. She was 26 years old and had never seen Earth. Born on a transport ship and raised in the colonies like most humans of her generation, Sarah was good at her job. Better than good. She could fix machines that the alien overseers had given up on, and she could find ore deposits that the scanners missed. The hegemony valued workers like her, but they never told her that. They simply gave her harder assignments and longer shifts one day while repairing a drilling unit in a tunnel that had been abandoned for decades. Sarah noticed something strange on her scanner. There was a signal coming from somewhere far below. Not from the colony, and not from any hegemony system she recognized. The signal pulsed in a steady rhythm like a heartbeat, and when she tried to translate it, her implant failed completely. She should have reported it to the overseers. That was the rule. Any unusual signals had to be reported immediately. But something stopped her. The signal felt familiar somehow, like a song she had heard as a child, but could not quite remember. Instead of reporting it, Sarah went to find Marcus Chum. Marcus was old, one of the oldest humans on Forge 7. He had been born on Earth before the conquest and still remembered the war. Most humans avoided him because talking to him made the overseer suspicious. But Sarah had known him since she was a little girl. He had taught her how to fix machines and how to read the old human languages that the hegemony had tried to erase. She found him in his quarters, a tiny room filled with broken equipment that he was always repairing. When she showed him the signal on her scanner, his face went pale. His hands began to shake, and for a long moment he said nothing at all. "Where did you find this?" he asked finally. His voice barely above a whisper. Sarah told him about the abandoned tunnel and the strange signal that her implant could not translate. Marcus listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he sat down heavily on his bed like a man who had just received terrible news. "They are still there," he said. "The sleepers." Sarah did not understand. She had never heard of any sleepers, and she told Marcus so. He looked at her for a long time, as if deciding whether to trust her with something dangerous. Then he began to speak, before the war ended. He told her, before the Treaty of Submission was signed, the governments of Earth had hidden something. Not weapons in the way the hegemony understood weapons. They had found and destroyed all of those. This was something else. Something that the hegemony had never imagined, because it was too patient and too quiet for them to detect. Marcus called it Project Prometheus. "The hegemony thinks they took everything from us," he said. "They think we have nothing left but our hands and our backs. But they are wrong. They have always been wrong. And one day they will learn just how wrong they have been." He would not tell her more than that. He said it was too dangerous. If the overseers discovered what she knew, they would kill her and everyone she had ever spoken to. The hegemony was brutal with secrets. And this was the greatest secret humanity had ever kept. But Sira could not stop thinking about it. In the weeks that followed, she returned to the abandoned tunnel again and again, listening to the signal, trying to understand it. She began to learn its patterns, the way it pulsed stronger at certain times and weaker at others. She started to believe that it was not just a signal but a message that had been waiting for someone to hear it for 300 years. She told no one except Marcus. And he warned her to be careful. The overseers were always watching. And there were humans who would sell secrets to the hegemony for extra food or better quarters. Trust was a luxury that conquered people could not afford. But Sarah knew that something was changing. The signal was getting stronger. It was as if whatever was hidden on Earth could sense that the time was coming, that the long wait was almost over, and Sarah felt in her heart that she was meant to be part of it. She did not know what the sleepers were or why they had been hidden for so long. But she knew that the galaxy had made a terrible mistake. The hegemony believed that humanity was broken and finished. They believed that 300 years of submission had turned humans into obedient workers with no fight left in them. They looked at colonies like Forge 7 and saw only resources to be used until they were empty. They did not see what Sarah saw. They did not feel the signal pulsing in the dark, and they had no idea what was about to wake up. The hegemony's pride. The war came without warning. The Valkyrian Dominion had been a distant threat for centuries, lurking at the edges of known space. But the hegemony had always believed they were too primitive and too disorganized to be a real danger. That belief died when the Dominion's bioships tore through the outer territories and began consuming everything in their path. The Valkyrian did not conquer worlds the way the hegemony did. They did not want slaves or resources or territory. They wanted biomass, living matter to feed their ever-growing fleet. Their ships were alive in a way that made even the hegemony's scientists uncomfortable, grown from the consumed flesh of 1,000 species. And at the center of each fleet was something called the aggregate. The aggregate was not a single being, but millions of minds merged into one. Every species the Dominion had ever consumed became part of it. Their memories and knowledge absorbed into a massive consciousness that grew smarter and hungrier with every world it devoured. It spoke in voices that overlapped and echoed. And those who heard it never forgot the Sound High Commander, Yethana, of the hegemony, watched the reports come in from the front lines and felt something he had not experienced in his long military career. He felt fear system after system fell to the Dominion. Planets that had belonged to the hegemony for thousands of years were stripped of life in days. The bioships moved faster than any fleet could respond. And when they finished feeding, they simply grew larger and moved on to the next target. Yethnar demanded resources from every subject species under hegemony control. Ships and soldiers and weapons of every kind. And from the humans, he demanded bodies. Thousands of them to serve as frontline troops against the Dominion advance. They breed quickly, he noted in his orders. They are replaceable. The human colonies received the news with silent resignation. They had no choice but to obey. Young men and women were loaded onto transport ships and sent to battlefields they would never return from. Their families could only watch and wait for death notices that came more often than letters on. Forge 7 Sarah Vance heard about the war and felt a cold anger building in her chest. The hegemony had taken everything from humanity, their home and their freedom and their pride. And now they were taking their children to die for masters who saw them as nothing more than meat. But the Dominion moved faster than anyone expected. When the bioships appeared at the edge of the Sol system, the hegemony garrison was caught completely unprepared. They had always believed that Earth was too deep in controlled space to be threatened. But the Dominion had found paths through the void that no one else knew existed. The battle lasted less than 4 hours. Sarah watched the reports on the colony's information screens as the hegemony fleet burned. Ship after ship destroyed by the riding masses of the bioships. The Valkyrian did not care about tactics or strategy. They simply overwhelmed everything with their sheer size and hunger. And when the last hegemony vessel went silent, the aggregate broadcast its message to the system. "We come to consume," it said in its terrible chorus of voices. "Earth will feed us, its people will become part of us. And from their flesh, we will grow strong enough to devour the galaxy." Sira expected the hegemony to respond, to send reinforcements, to do something to protect one of their subject worlds, but no help came. The High Council met in emergency session and decided that Earth was not worth saving. The planet had been stripped of resources decades ago. Its population was useful, but not irreplaceable. And the cost of fighting the Dominion there would be too high. Ambassador Kethra voted against sending aid without hesitation. "The humans have no weapons," he said. "There is nothing on Earth worth defending." When Sira heard those words, she felt the anger inside her turn into something else. Something harder and more dangerous. She found Marcus in his quarters and told him what was happening. That Earth was going to be consumed and the hegemony was going to let it happen. Marcus listened, and then he smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had been waiting for this moment his entire life. "The signal," he said. "It is stronger now, is it not?" Sira nodded. She had felt it too. Ever since the Dominion entered the Sol system, the signal from Earth had been pulsing with an intensity she had never experienced before. It was as if something deep beneath the planet's surface had sensed the approaching danger and was preparing to respond. "Then it is time," Marcus said. "The sleepers have been waiting for 300 years. They were never meant to fight the hegemony. They were meant for something worse. And now that something worse has finally arrived," he told Sira that they needed to get to Earth, that someone had to be there to help when the awakening began. She asked how they could possibly travel across the galaxy without being caught. And Marcus smiled again. "I have been planning this for 50 years, he said. "There is a ship hidden in the lower tunnels. An old human vessel that I have been repairing piece by piece since before you were born. It is small and it is slow, but it will get us there." Sarah thought about what she was leaving behind. A job and her quarters and the few friends she had made on Forge 7. But none of it mattered. Earth was dying, and something inside her was being pulled toward it like iron to a magnet. They left that night as their small ship slipped away from the colony and into the darkness between stars. Sira looked back at the only home she had ever known. She did not know if she would ever return. She did not know if she would survive what was coming. But she knew that she was exactly where she needed to be. Behind them, the Dominion fleet circled. Earth like vultures around the dying animal, and deep beneath the planet's surface, something ancient and terrible began to stir. The awakening, the journey to Earth, took 3 weeks. Sarah and Marcus traveled through forgotten shipping lanes and dead systems, avoiding both Dominion hunters and hegemony patrols. The old ship that Marcus had spent 50 years rebuilding was small and cramped, but it flew true. Its human-made engines still humming with power after 3 centuries of waiting. As they drew closer to Earth, the signal grew stronger. Sira could feel it now without her scanner. A pulse that seemed to vibrate in her bones and whisper in her dreams. Marcus told her that this was normal. That humans had always been connected to their homeworld in ways that science could not explain. They entered the Sol system from above the orbital plane where the Dominion ships were not watching. Marcus knew paths through the asteroid belt that had been mapped before the conquest and forgotten by everyone except a handful of old survivors, like himself. He flew with the skill of a man who had done this many times before. And Sira realized that he had been preparing for this moment longer than she had been alive. Earth looked wrong from space. The Dominion fleet surrounded it like a shell of flesh and metal. Bioships pulsing with stolen life, as they prepared for the final assault. The planet itself was dark, its cities empty, its people hiding in whatever shelters they could find. The hegemony had evacuated no one, and the humans of Earth were waiting to die, but the signal was stronger than ever. Marcus brought the ship down through the atmosphere at night, using the mountains to hide their approach. They landed in what had once been called Switzerland, a place of tall peaks and deep valleys that the Dominion had not yet reached. The air was cold and clean in a way that Sarah had never experienced. And for a moment she simply stood and breathed. "This way," Marcus said. And he began to walk toward the largest mountain. They climbed for hours through snow and ice, following coordinates that Marcus had memorized decades ago. Sarah's lungs burned and her legs ached, but she did not stop. The signal was pulling her forward now, so strong that she could almost hear it as a voice calling her name. They found the entrance hidden behind a frozen waterfall, a door made of metal that looked like stone. When Sarah touched it, the door scanned her hand and her eye and something else that she could not identify. Then it opened with a soft hiss of ancient machinery coming back to life inside. The mountain was a facility that had been built before the conquest. The walls were covered with screens and control panels, all dark, all waiting. The air smelled of dust and time, but the machines were intact, preserved by technology that the hegemony had never discovered. Sarah walked through the empty corridors with her heart pounding, knowing that she was seeing something that no human had seen in 300 years. Marcus led her to a central chamber that was larger than any building she had ever been. Inside and there she saw the sleepers, thousands of them. They lay in rows of glass pods that stretched from one end of the chamber to the other. Men and women of every age and every race, their faces peaceful, their bodies still. They were dressed in simple gray suits, and their skin had a faint metallic sheen that made them look almost like statues. "Project Prometheus," Marcus said, his voice echoing in the vast space. "These are the volunteers who gave themselves to protect humanity. They were enhanced at the genetic level, rebuilt to be stronger and faster and tougher than any soldier the galaxy has ever seen. Their minds are networked together so they can fight as one. And they have been sleeping here since the day the treaty was signed." Sarah walked among the pods and looked at the faces of the sleepers. Some were young and some were old. Some looked fierce and some looked kind. But all of them had the same expression of deep and patient rest, waiting for the moment when they would be needed. "Why?" she asked. "Why were they hidden instead of used in the war?" Marcus walked to a control panel and began pressing buttons that lit up at his touch. Because the scientists who made them saw something that no one else could see. They intercepted Valkyran signals decades before the hegemony arrived, and they knew that the Dominion was coming. They built the Prometheus soldiers not to fight the hegemony, but to fight something far worse. The screens around the chamber flickered to life, showing images of the Dominion fleet above and tactical data streaming in from sensors hidden across the planet. Marcus entered a final command and the machines began to hum with power. "The awakening sequence is starting," he said. "It will take 1 hour for all of them to wake up. And when they do, they will know exactly what they need to do. The network in their minds connects them to the tactical systems. They will see the enemy, and they will understand how to destroy it." Sarah watched as the first pods began to glow with soft light. The sleepers inside them stirred, their eyes moving beneath closed lids, their fingers twitching as 300 years of sleep began to fade away. One pod opened before the others. The woman inside sat up slowly, her movements careful and precise. She was tall and lean with gray hair cut short and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. When she looked at Sarah, there was no confusion in her gaze, only a calm and terrible awareness. "I am Commander Helena Voss," she said, her voice rough from centuries of silence. "I was the first to sleep, and I will be the first to fight. Tell me what year it is, and what threatens our world." Marcus told her everything. The conquest and the submission, the centuries of slavery. The Dominion fleet waiting above. Voss listened without expression. And when he finished, she simply nodded. Then we do what we were made to do. She said. Around her the other pods began to open one by one. And the Prometheus soldiers rose from their long sleep, stretching muscles that had not moved in 300 years, their eyes connecting to the tactical network, their minds linking together into a single perfect weapons era. Watched them and felt tears running down her face for the first time in her life. She understood what hope felt like. The sleepers had awakened, and the galaxy was about to learn that humanity was not as broken as it believed. The battle for Earth, the Dominion began its assault at dawn. Ships descended through the atmosphere like falling stars, each one carrying thousands of Valkyran soldiers, twisted creatures that had once been 100 different species before the aggregate consumed and rebuilt them. They landed near the ruined cities and began to spread across the land, searching for any life they could find and consume. The aggregate watched from its flagship in orbit, confident that this world would fall like all the others. The humans were weak and weaponless. Their masters had abandoned them. There was nothing to fear and everything to gain. It was wrong. Commander Helena Voss stood on a hilltop, overlooking one of the landing zones. Her networked mind connected to every other Prometheus soldier on the planet. She could see what they saw and feel what they felt. Thousands of enhanced warriors spread across the continents, waiting in the ruins and the forests and the mountains. Begin, she said. The Valkyran never knew what hit them. The first wave of soldiers died in seconds, cut down by weapons that moved too fast to see. The Prometheus fighters emerged from hiding places that should have been impossible, striking with a speed and precision that no species in the galaxy could match. Their enhanced bodies moved through the enemy lines like water through cracks, finding every weakness and exploiting it perfectly. Sarah watched from the command bunker deep inside the mountain, screens showing feeds from cameras hidden across the battlefield. She saw a single Prometheus soldier take on 20 Valkyran at once, moving between them so fast that they shot each other trying to hit him. She saw a squad of 6 clear an entire landing zone in under 3 minutes, leaving nothing alive. The Dominion had conquered 1,000 worlds. They had consumed species that had ruled empires for millions of years. They believed they understood war better than anyone else in the galaxy. They had never faced anything like this. The Prometheus soldiers did not fight like normal warriors. They did not form lines or use standard tactics. Instead, they fought as a single mind with thousands of bodies, each one knowing exactly where the others were and what they were doing. When one saw an opening, the others moved to exploit it. When one was in danger, the others covered the retreat. They flowed across the battlefield like a tide, unstoppable and relentless. The aggregate grew concerned. It sent more troops to the surface, landing ship after ship, flooding the planet with bodies. But the Prometheus soldiers adapted instantly to every new deployment. They used the ruins of human cities as weapons, collapsing buildings onto enemy formations, luring soldiers into kill zones that had been prepared centuries ago. They knew every tunnel and every hiding place, and they used that knowledge to destroy everything the Dominion sent against them. By noon, the invasion had stalled. By nightfall, it was failing. The aggregate's flagship received reports that no Valkyran commander had ever sent before. Reports of soldiers being hunted through empty streets, of entire battalions vanishing without a trace, of enemies that seemed to know what the Dominion was going to do before they did it. In the command bunker, Sarah watched Commander Voss coordinate the defense with calm efficiency. The older woman's eyes moved constantly as she processed information from the network, issuing orders that her soldiers carried out without hesitation. She was not just a commander. She was the beating heart of a weapon that humanity had spent decades building. The aggregate will come itself soon, Voss said. It always does when its armies fail. It cannot understand defeat, and it will need to see what is happening with its own eyes. She was right. The aggregate's flagship began to descend through the atmosphere, a mountain of flesh and metal that blotted out the sky. The merged consciousness that controlled the Dominion had decided to end this battle personally, to consume these strange humans and add their abilities to its own collection. It landed in what had once been a great city, crushing ruins beneath its bulk, and from its depths poured the elite guard of the Dominion. Creatures that had been enhanced with the best traits of 1,000 consumed species. Commander Voss led the assault herself. Sarah watched through the cameras as the Prometheus soldiers converged on the landing site. Moving through the destroyed streets with silent purpose, Voss was at the front, her enhanced body glowing faintly with the energy of the network. Her eyes fixed on the massive form of the aggregate ship. The battle was brutal and fast. Elite Guard was the best the Dominion had. Creatures built for war with claws that could tear through metal and armor that could stop most weapons. But the Prometheus soldiers were better. They fought with a fury that seemed almost personal, as if 300 years of rage was being released in every blow. Voss reached the aggregate first. She climbed the ship like a spider scaling a wall, her enhanced muscles carrying her up the organic surface, while Valkyrian defenders tried and failed to stop her. She moved too fast for them to track, dodging attacks that should have been impossible to see. Killing everything that got in her way. Inside the ship she found the core, the pulsing mass of merged minds that controlled everything the Dominion did. "You cannot kill us," the aggregate said in its chorus of stolen voices. "We are millions. We are eternal. We are." Voss did not let it finish. She tore into the core with her bare hands, ripping through flesh and neural tissue with strength that no natural creature possessed. The aggregate screamed in frequencies that shattered glass across 3 continents, a sound of pure terror and disbelief. It had consumed 1,000 species, and never once had it faced something that could hurt it like this. Accident. The scream was broadcast across hegemony communication channels across 1,000 worlds. The subject species watched as humans, the broken and conquered humans that everyone had forgotten, destroyed the most feared weapon the galaxy had ever known. They watched Commander Voss stand in the heart of the aggregate and tear it apart piece by piece until the screaming finally stopped. The bioships in orbit went dead, their controlling intelligence destroyed. They drifted aimlessly and then began to fall, burning up in the atmosphere like the dying dreams of a dead god. The Dominion fleet retreated, the first retreat in their entire history, and on Earth, the Prometheus soldiers stood among the ruins of the battlefield, their bodies tired, but their spirits unbroken. They had done what they were made to do. Humanity had won. The new order of the galaxy was silent for 3 days after the battle. Every species that had access to communication networks had seen the broadcast. They had watched humans tear apart the aggregate with their bare hands. They had seen the Dominion fleet retreat for the first time in recorded history. And they did not know what to think. The Hegemony High Council met in emergency session on the 4th day. Ambassador Kethra stood before his fellow council members with a face that had lost all of its usual arrogance. The screens behind him showed images from Earth, the wreckage of the Dominion fleet, the bodies of Valkyrian soldiers scattered across battlefields, and the Prometheus soldiers standing guard over a planet that should have been dead. "How did this happen?" demanded High Commander Yethnor. "How did the humans hide an army from us for 300 years? How did they develop enhancement technology that surpasses anything in our own laboratories? How did they defeat an enemy that was destroying our forces across the outer territories?" No one had an answer. The Council had believed that humanity was broken. They had watched the conquered species for centuries, monitoring their communications and searching their settlements, and they had found nothing. No weapons, no resistance cells, no plans for rebellion. The humans had seemed exactly what the hegemony wanted them to be, but they had been wrong, Commander Helena. Voss addressed the council via quantum link from Earth. Her image appeared on the main screen, a tall woman with gray hair and eyes that seemed to look through anyone who met them. Behind her stood Sarah Vance and Marcus Chun and a dozen other Prometheus soldiers. Their faces calm and watchful. "You are wondering how we did it," Voss said, her voice clear and steady. "You are wondering what else we might be hiding and whether you should be afraid. Let me answer those questions for you." She paused, and the council waited, none of them daring to interrupt. "You took our ships," Voss continued. "You took our stations and our weapons factories and our military research. You took our freedom and our dignity, and you scattered our people across the galaxy to work until they died. You believed that you had taken everything, but you never understood us." Kethra opened his mouth to speak, but Voss raised her hand and he fell silent. "We do not build weapons because we want to fight," she said. "We build them because we refuse to die. 300 years ago, our scientists looked at the galaxy and saw two threats coming for humanity. One was the hegemony and one was the dominion. They knew we could not defeat both, so they made a choice. They hid our greatest weapon and waited for the greater enemy to arrive." Yethaner leaned forward. "You are saying that you allowed us to conquer you." "I am saying that we survived," Voss replied. "Your conquest was brutal, but it was not extinction. The Dominion would have consumed every human being alive and added our minds to its collective. We could rebuild after you. We could not rebuild after them. So we waited and we planned and we kept our secret for 300 years. The council members looked at each other with expressions of fear and uncertainty. They had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They had never encountered a species that could outthink them across centuries. "What do you want?" Kethra asked finally. His voice smaller than it had ever been. Voss smiled. And it was not a friendly smile. "You offered to renegotiate the Treaty of Submission," she said. "I decline. There will be a new treaty, but this one will be written by humanity. We will no longer be your subjects or your workers or your slaves. We will be equals at your council table. And any species that tries to harm us again will learn what the Dominion learned." She let that threat hang in the air for a long moment. "We are not asking for war," Voss said. "We have had enough of war. We are asking for respect and freedom and the right to live as we choose. These are not unreasonable demands, and I suggest you consider them carefully before you respond." The council voted that same day. The vote was unanimous. Humanity was granted full status as an independent species, with all the rights and protections that came with it. The Treaty of Submission was dissolved. The orbital platforms around Earth were removed, and human colonies across the galaxy were given the choice to remain where they were or return home. Sarah Vance stood on the surface of Earth a week later, looking up at a sky that was finally free of watchers. Marcus Chun stood beside her, older and more tired than she had ever seen him, but smiling. He had waited his entire life for this moment, and now that it had arrived, he seemed almost unable to believe it. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now we rebuild," Marcus said. "We have a planet to restore and a people to bring home. We have centuries of lost culture to recover and new generations to teach. It will take 100 years or more, but we have time now. We have freedom on Forge 7 and 100 other colonies." The humans who had lived in submission their entire lives heard the news and did not know how to react. Some wept and some cheered, and some simply stood in silence, unable to process the change that had come so suddenly, but all of them stood a little straighter. All of them whispered a word that had been forbidden for 300 years, a word that they had been taught to forget, a word that meant more than any other in the human language: hope. Cross the galaxy, other subject species watched what humanity had done and began to wonder. If the humans could hide weapons for 3 centuries, if they could defeat an enemy that the hegemony could not, If they could transform from slaves to equals in a matter of days, then what else might be possible? What else might be waiting in the dark places of the universe? What other secrets might conquered peoples be keeping from there? Master's Commander. Voss knew that the galaxy would never be the same. The balance of power had shifted, and it would keep shifting in the years to come. But that was a problem for the future. For now, she was content to stand on the soil of Earth and breathe the air of her homeworld. She had slept for 300 years, and she had awakened to save her people. It was enough. Syrah looked at the stars that were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there were other humans, millions of them, waiting to hear that the long night was finally over. She would help them come home. She would help them remember what it meant to be free, and if anyone tried to take that freedom away again, the sleepers would be ready. They had proven that humanity was never truly conquered, only waiting, and the galaxy would never make the mistake of underestimating them again.